The Washington Post is doing whatever they possibly can to try to smear Bernie Sanders. And we got very clear evidence of that this week, showing that this is not a conspiracy theory being pushed by Bernie Sanders. This is not just Bernie Sanders being anti-media. No, this is 100% the Washington Post flat out lying about the truthfulness of the things that Bernie Sanders has to say. Earlier this week, Bernie Sanders made this statement. 500,000 Americans will go bankrupt this year from medical bills. They didn't go to Las Vegas and blow their money at a casino. Their crime was that they got sick. How barbaric is a system that says, I'm going to destroy your family's finances because you had cancer? Now, the Washington Post apparently took issue with the fact that Bernie Sanders said 500,000 people were going to go bankrupt because of medical bills this year. And they decided to do some digging. Now, before I get into the digging that they did, it's worth pointing out that just a few months ago, the Washington Post actually ran a headline saying that 530,000 American citizens will go into bankruptcy this year because of medical bills. So this claim that they decided, oh, we better check this out, their paper had made that claim months ago. And that also ties into the fact checking. Because that same report that the Washington Post used that was perfectly credible a couple months ago, suddenly in the fact checker department, that study is no longer credible. So it was credible when the Washington Post reported on it, but when Bernie Sanders decided to say it out loud, nope, suddenly that's not credible anymore. And Glenn Kessler, the guy that runs the Washington Post fact-checking department, actually said that, well, the reason I gave him 3 Pinocchios, or a mostly false rating for his very accurate claim, was because the original study wasn't actually peer-reviewed. So, okay. Then out comes the author of the original study, a man by the name of Dr. David Himmelstein, professor of public health at CUNY, who said, my paper was in fact peer-reviewed. Now you, Washington Post fact checker, are lying about me, just like you're lying about Bernie Sanders. I demand you print a retraction. To which Glenn Kessler doubled down. He said, well, I'd never said you weren't peer-reviewed, even though he did. I meant you weren't peer-reviewed in the same way that like other articles are peer-reviewed. Your peer review wasn't as good, I guess, as other scientific At this point, Kessler's just grasping at straws. Whatever he can find to be like, no, I didn't say the thing that I said. I meant that I didn't like the way that you did the thing that I said you didn't even do to begin with. You're lying. Glenn Kessler is straight up lying because of some kind of slight he has against Bernie Sanders. Now, could it be that Bernie Sanders called them out for their one-sided coverage, so they decided, the Washington Post, to double down and just give him even more horrible coverage? Because over the last couple days, this story has backfired spectacularly for the Washington Post. It has absolutely blown up in their faces and called into question the credibility of their entire fact-checking department. Because they decided to lie because they wanted to hurt Bernie Sanders. That's what this is about. That is what happened. Bernie Sanders told the truth. And if anything, he lowballed the number a little bit because the original study said roughly 530,000 Americans go into bankruptcy every year because of medical debt. Bernie only said 500,000. So he lowballed it by about 30,000. But even that, according to the Washington Post, was mostly false because of reasons that they created that actually turned out in the end to be the mostly false statement. Bernie is right, Washington Post is wrong, and they still refuse to apologize or issue a retraction, even though they blatantly lied about his claim. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget, if you like what you see here, like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And now you can also become a member of Ring of Fire and get exclusive early access to certain Ring of Fire videos all throughout the week. Just click on the little join button right below the video.